Good morning and welcome to my MGT420 Contemporary Business Leader presentation. My name is Zachary Potter. Today I'm presenting what I have learned from interviewing Heather Potter, a court clerk supervisor at Orange County Superior Court in Costa Mesa, California. This presentation covers 9 areas: Heather's background, her greatest career achievements, a significant challenge she faced, the power bases she used, her organization's mission and vision, the leadership theory that best describes her approach, a comparison to a well-known public sector leader from named Santa Ono, leadership lessons, and my personal reflection on the research process. All sources are cited in APA format on the final slide. With me today is Heather Potter herself. Heather, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Zach. I'm happy to be here and to share a little bit about my career and what I have learned over the years.
Heather Potter is a clerk supervisor at the Orange County Superior Court in Costa Mesa, California. She has held her leadership role for 14 years and currently oversees a team of 10 employees. In her role, Heather manages clerks who are responsible for case filing, record management, court scheduling, and direct public service. This is a highly regulated environment where accuracy, confidentiality, and ethical conduct are non-negotiable every single day. I chose to interview Heather because she is my mother and I have observed her leadership firsthand for years. Her 14-year career in the court system and her well-known ethical integrity made her an ideal subject for this assignment. She meets all the required criteria, more than 3 years in managerial capacity, overseeing at least 10 employees. According to Nordhaus 2022, servant leadership is especially evident in public services roles where the leader primarily obligation is to those who serve, both staff and the community. Heather's long tenure and consistent performance in the court system reflects exactly that kind of deep, sustained commitment to institutional stewardship.
That is a good description of what the job involves. Every day I walk in knowing that the work my team does directly affects the people who come through the courthouse. Whether they are going through something difficult or just need a recording processed or a record processed, the sense of responsibility is something I have never taken lightly.
Heather's greatest career achievement is something she calls being a consistency trainer. Starting in 2012 and continuing to present day, she led the modernization of how new employees are trained at the Orange County Superior Court. The people involved are her staff and the judicial officers who depend on well-prepared clerks to keep courtroom operations running smoothly. Heather, can you describe the impact of these achievements in your own words?
Sure, Zach. When I started, there was no real standardization training program. New hires were kind of thrown into the job and learned as they went. That created inconsistency, different people doing the same task in different ways, which leads to errors. What I built was a consistent training process so that every new hire comes in, goes through the same steps, learns the right way to do things from start to finish, and can be efficient in the workplace from day to day. It matters because when court records are filed incorrectly or cases are handled inconsistently, it affects real people's lives. I wanted to make sure that my team never contributed to that kind of problem.
Now on slide 3 you can see Heather's servant leadership scores for part A, which covers this greatest achievement. Her total was a 43 of 50, placing her in the high range. Her top scores were listening, empathy, stewardship, commitment to growth of people, and interest in building community. All scored at 4 or 5 of 5. The spotlight characteristics in stewardship, where Heather scored a 5. Stewardship means acting as a responsible character of both people and institutional resources. According to Greenleaf 2002, stewardship is the hallmark of a leader who holds their institution in trust for the greater good. Heather, can you give us an example of how stewardship showed up while you were building this training program?
Sure, Zach. I was very deliberate about not letting the training process disrupt daily court operations. I could not just pull people off their work for days of training, so I built the program in a way that worked around our caseload. I made sure every person was properly trained before they were ever on their own. And I made sure that resources I was using, people's time, the court's materials were handled carefully and with purpose. Stewardship to me means not wasting what you have been trusted with.
The significant challenge Heather described began in 2014 and is one that has come up more than once throughout her career. After properly training a new hire, that employee failed to follow proper court procedures. This created an ethical dilemma. She had the authority to escalate towards termination, but instead she chose to restrain the employees and resolve the situation internally. The outcome was that the new hire, after correction, became a contributing member to the team again. Heather, can you walk us through what that situation felt like from a leadership standpoint and why you made the choice you did?
Well, it's never easy when someone you train does not follow through. Your first instinct might be to say, well, I did my part. They failed. But I do not think that is leadership. I ask myself, did I do everything I could? Is this person capable of doing the job correctly? And in those cases, the answer was yes. They were capable. They just needed correction and another chance. Getting someone fired is easy. Deciding to invest more time and effort into helping them succeed, that's the harder choice. But it was the right choice. One, if you believe people can grow, and I do.
This response reflects a leadership role rather than a purely managerial one. Nordhaus 2022 draws a clear distinction. Managers maintain systems and enforce compliance, while leaders influence people and consider their long-term well-being. Heather did both. She upheld the standard and invested in the person. Her Part B servant leadership score reflects this. Her score was 43 of 50, again in the high range. Her highest scores were empathy, healing, awareness, foresight, and stewardship, all at 5 out of 5. Notably, her healing score rose from a 3 in Part A to 5 here, because this challenge required active work to repair the employee's confidence and reintegrate them into the team. Her lower scores in persuasion and community, both at 3, reflect this, as it was not a situation built on consensus. It was a required, firm, decisive call by a leader willing to stand behind it. To understand how Heather handled this challenge, we apply French and Raven's 1959 framework of power bases, the 5 foundational sources of influence available to leaders: legitimate, expert, referent, reward, and coercive. Heather, can you describe the mission and vision of Orange County Superior Court as you understand from your own role?
The mission of our court is to serve the public and support the judiciary by maintaining accurate, timely, and accessible court records. The vision, as I see it, is to be a court clerk's office that sets the standard for efficiency, integrity, and public service. And the strategy to get there is continuous process improvement, development of staff, and adapting or adopting the digital tools and systems that make the work more accurate and more accessible to the public.
Heather's Part C entrepreneurial mindset score was 28 of 35, placing her in the high range. Her scores were need to achieve 4, openness to experience 4, innovate ability 4, risk propensity 3, proactivity and work ethic 5, self-efficiency 4, and internal locus of control 4. Her highest score was proactivity and work ethic at 5 of 5. As I can't say that, but 2017 describes entrepreneurial thinking as non-business environments means identifying what needs to change and taking initiative to change it, without waiting for someone above you to tell you to do it. That is exactly what Heather did with this training program. Her lowest score was risk propensity at 3, which is entirely appropriate. The court system is a regulated public sector environment. Calculated caution is not a weakness here. It is part of maintaining the integrity of the court's mission that the court's mission depends on.
And I have always believed that you see something that could be done better. It's your responsibility to try to fix it. I did not want to wait for someone to hand me a training manual. I built one. The proactivity is something I try to model for my team. If you see a gap, you fill it.
The leadership theory that best describes Heather Potter's approaches is Robert Greenleaf's servant leadership theory, first published in 1977, as shown on slide 7. Greenleaf proposed that the most efficient leaders begin not with a desire for power, but with a desire to serve. This inverts the traditional organizational pyramid. Rather than directing from the top down, the servant leader prioritizes the needs of those they lead and the communities they serve. The evidence from Heather's score strongly supports this classification. Her combined servant leadership score across parts A and B is 86 of 100, placing her firmly in the high range. Her most consistent top scores, listening, empathy, stewardship, commitment to growth of people, and healing, are all exactly the same characteristics that Spears, 2010, identifies as the most critical for servant leaders in institutional environments. Particularly notable is the shift in her healing score. It rose from a 3 in Part A to 5 in Part B. That increase shows that Heather adapts her leadership approach to what the situation requires. When building the training program, healing was less central. When correcting the employee who had failed, restoring that person's confidence and reintegrating them into the team became the priority. Nordhaus, 2022, notes that servant leadership is especially well suited to the public sector and mission-driven organizations because leaders' role is already defined by service rather than profit. Heather, does servant leadership feel like an accurate description of how you approach your work?
I did not know I had it. It had a name until Zachary explained it to me during this process. But yes, everything it describes is how I have always thought about the job. You're not a supervisor to have the power over people. You are a supervisor to make sure your team has what they need to do the work well and to grow in the process. If they succeed, the court succeeds and the public is better served. This is the whole point.
For part 2 of the assignment, I compared Heather's leadership style to that of a well-known public sector leader, Santa Ono, former president of the University of British Columbia at the University of Michigan, and currently serving in a leadership role at the Ellison Institute of Technology. As shown in the comparison table on slide 8, both Heather and Ono share a servant leadership philosophy. Santa Ono has explicitly described servant leadership as his guiding approach, stating that the best leader is someone who is at the top of the organization but works from the bottom to serve everyone. Detroit News 2022. Heather's score and career choices reflect the same philosophy. Looking at strengths, Heather's core strengths are stewardship and staff development. Her 14-year tenure and consistent investment in training are evidence of that. Her second strength is ethical decisiveness under pressure. She made the harder, more human choice when faced with a failing employee, and she stood behind it. Santa Ono's strengths were charisma and entrepreneurial vision. His leadership at Michigan guaranteed a $7 billion fundraiser campaign and made it first in university to offer custom AI tools to its entire academic community. University of Michigan 2025. For weakness, Heather identified that she has difficult typing when others are watching, which can affect performance if in observed high-pressure situations. Heather, would you like to add anything about that?
Yes, Zachary, it sounds small, but it's real. When I'm being watched, I second guess myself and it slows me down. It's something I'm aware of and working on.
Santa Ono's weaknesses were more consequential in scale. According to Wikipedia 2025 and reporting from higher education publications, Ono was frequently absent from campus at Michigan, missed numerous executive meetings, and ultimately reversed his DEI commitments under political pressure from the state of Florida. These inconsistencies raise serious questions about his follow-through. Both leaders are servant leaders at the core, but Heather's 14 years of consistent institution-central service contrasts sharply with Ono's 3-year tenure that ended without fulfilling his contractual obligations. The first lesson is to demonstrate ethical courage. Both Heather and Santa Ono faced moments requiring difficult decisions under pressure. Heather's decision to retain rather than terminate, knowing she could be second-guessed for it, demonstrates that leadership sometimes means doing the harder things because it is the right thing. Nordhaus 2022 identifies ethical leadership as foundational to long-term credibility. Leaders who avoid difficult decisions to protect their own comfort ultimately lose the trust of their own teams. The second lesson is to demonstrate commitment to people's growth. Heather's 14-year investment in building and refining a training program is not just good management. It is a statement about how she views the people she leads. Greenleaf, 2002, described this as one of servant leadership's most essential characteristics. The belief that every person has intrinsic value beyond their immediate job performance. Spears, 2010, found that leaders who invest in their people's growth generate measurably higher retention, engagement, and institutional performance over time. The third lesson draws from Santa Ono's example, is to avoid inconsistency under external pressure. Ono's reversible on this DEI commitment under political pressure and its pattern of absence from campus illustrates what happens when a leader behavior stops matching their started values. Norhaus 2022 describes an authentic leadership as the alignment between what you say and believe and what you actually do. When leaders shift their commitments based on external pressure, they signal to the followers that all their commitment are conditional, and that erodes the psychological safety teams need to function well.
And second, add one more thing from my own experience. Do not let pride stop you from asking for help or admitting when something is not working. Early in my career, I thought I had to have all the answers. I learned over time that the best thing you can do for your team is model that it's okay not to have everything figured out as long as you are willing to work through it together.
As shown on the slide, I chose to interview Heather Potter because she is my mom, and I have had a front row seat to her leadership for most of my life. Her 14-year career at the Orange County Superior Court, her consistent ethical standards, and her genuine dedication to the people she supervises made her not just an accessible subject for a genuinely strong one for this assignment. I chose Santa Ono as my comparison leader because he is one of the most publicly documented servant leaders in a public service environment. His leadership style is not something I had to interpret from his actions. He described it explicitly and repeatedly in public forums. His tenure across multiple major institutions provides a rich body of documented evidence covering both his strengths and the limits of the servant leadership at scale. His industry, higher education and public research universities, closely parallels the public sector court environment where Heather works. In terms of follow-up questions, when I needed to draw out information about the healing characteristic without using the academic term, I asked Heather, quote, "Was there ever a time when conflict between team members affected the work environment and how did you handle it?" For internal locus of control, I asked, "Do you feel that your own decisions and actions are what drive outcomes at work, or do you feel outside forces play a bigger role?" These reframings helped Heather engage honestly in concepts she would not have known by their academic names. What I learned from this process is that translating academic frameworks into natural conversation is a real skill. The hardest part was not the research or the writing. It is helping Heather respond to concepts like entrepreneurial self-efficiency and healing in a way that felt genuine rather than coached. I overcame that by leading with real scenarios and examples rather than definitions, which produced more honest responses and, I believe, more accurate scores.
Zach, from my side, I will say this was an interesting experience. Some of those questions made me think about my work in a way I never had before, putting formal names to things I just do instinctively. It reminded me that leadership is not something that only happens in boardrooms. It happens every day in every workplace, including a courthouse in Costa Mesa.
Slide 11 provides a visual summary of all three scoring assessments from Contemporary Business Leader Materials template. In Part A, Heather's servant leadership scores during the greatest career achievement, the training modernization, a total of 43 of 50, placing her high in the range. Her strongest characteristics were listening, empathy, stewardship, commitment to growth of people, and interest in building community, all at 4 of 5. Healing was her lowest at 3, which makes sense Building a training program is a proactive, constructive effort that did not require significant relationship repair. In Part B, her score during her significant challenge also a 43 of 50. The most meaningful shift between Part A and B is healing, which rose from a 3 to a 5. That reflects the additional restorative work required for an employee when an employee fails and is to be brought back into the team. Awareness, foresight, and stewardship all held steady at 5 in both parts, confirming these are stable foundation elements of how Heather leads regardless of the situation. Persuasion and community each came in at 3 in Part B, reflecting that this challenge called for a decisive individual decision rather than a group consensus process. In Part C, the entrepreneurial mindset, Heather scores 28 of 35, also in the high range. Proactivity and work ethic led at 5. Need to achieve openness to experience, innovative ability, self-efficiency, and internal locus of control all scored at 4. Risk propensity came in at 3, appropriate for a regulated public sector environment where caution protects the court's integrity. Taken together, all these scores place Heather firmly in the high range across the servant leadership and entrepreneurial mindset, both in the context of her greatest achievement and in the face of her most significant challenge. So these were all my references that I used during this project to get all the information I need. Other than that, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome, Zachary. Thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful.
It was very helpful. Thank you.